Mechanical aiming skill is one of the most coveted abilities in any first-person shooter game. Players like Shroud and Simple are looked at as gods among us mere mortals for their ability to precisely click on heads with extreme speed, accuracy, and consistency. But is this type of mechanical excellence something these top players are born with, or something that they learn through training? I think it's likely a bit of both. And the good news is that just about anyone can drastically improve their aiming skill with a little bit of knowledge and a solid practice routine. I've personally seen friends who had far below average aim become incredibly good aimers with just a few tweaks to their technique and a lot of intentional practice. So let's dig in. How can we turn you into an aiming god? This guide is going to cover a lot of ground, so I broke it into a few parts. The main sections we're going to cover are mouse selection, computer settings, grip type, aim and wrist movement, setup consistency, training routines, and finally pre-aiming and game awareness. I'll also put timestamps in the description so you can jump around as needed. The first topic we need to cover is choosing the right tool for the job. While it's true that a great player can perform well with any mouse, choosing the right mouse for you personally can make a massive difference. In my mind, there's three major components that make up a great mouse. Number one is the internals. This means the sensor is accurate and replicates your hand movement reliably in game. The buttons have very little travel time and feel consistent, so that when you click there's as small of a delay as possible in game. And finally, the scroll wheel and thumb buttons are reliable and feel great to use. Number two is the weight. The lighter the better. I know some people out there think they prefer a heavy mouse, but I really believe this is because they conflate quality with being heavy duty. Or maybe they play it way too high of a sensitivity and a light mouse just makes the crosshair fly all over the place. If you don't believe me that a lighter mouse gives you more control, try this exercise out. Go to the gym or find the weights in your house, and pick up a 10-pound dumbbell and try your best to make an absolutely perfect circle in the air in front of you. Now do the exact same thing with a 2-pound weight. I promise that you'll perform this much better with the lighter dumbbell, and the same exact principle applies to using a lighter mouse. It allows you to flick your hand around on the mousepad quickly and accurately, feeling like the mouse is just an extension of your own hand. Number three is the shape. A mouse might have the perfect buttons and be super lightweight, but if you can't get a good grip on it, your aim will never be the best it can be. Shape is a super personal thing, and everyone has different hand shapes and grip preferences. More on that in a little bit. I personally have switched away from using my G Pro wireless lately, even though it's just about the best possible mouse you could buy on paper, because when I use my most comfortable grip shape, I just can't hold the mouse right and it feels like it wiggles a little bit under my fingers, causing a bit of hand cramping and instability. Mice come mostly in two different types of shapes. You have ambidextrous, meaning it can be held either left or right-handed, or ergonomic, where it's primarily designed for right-handed people. Neither is necessarily better or worse, and it comes down to personal preference and the grip type you choose to decide which one feels most comfortable for you. There's literally dozens of top mice on the market these days, and I could make a whole video discussing the pros and cons of some of my favorites. But here's a short list to check out if you're on the market for a new FPS mouse. If you want to go wireless, it's hard to beat the Logitech G Pro Wireless or the new Razer Viper Ultimate. The Logitech G305 is also a great wireless mouse for about a third of the price of these other two if you're looking for a cheaper option. For wired, some of the absolute top mice these days are the glorious Model O and Model O-, any of the new Final Mouse products, and the G-Wolf Skull or Hottie. Glorious also has a new mouse called the Model D that's coming out very soon, which is an ergonomic shape. I have one pre-ordered and I'll be doing a full review as soon as I get my hands on it, hopefully later this year. I'm incredibly excited for the potential of this mouse because it's a very similar shape to the Zowie EC2A, which is one of the most comfortable FPS mice I've ever used. There's a ton of other mice to mention, but instead of going through all of them, I'll just point you to my two favorite gear review channels on YouTube, Rocket Jump Ninja and Bad Seed Tech. Both are excellent review channels and you can learn a lot from them. I'll put a link to each of them in the description. Finally, we can't talk about FPS gaming mice without at least mentioning our mousepad. You're going to want a huge one that gives you plenty of room to wildly swing your whole arm around. My personal favorite right now is the PureTrack Talent, but there's many good other mousepads to choose from. A few top brands to look out for are Zowie, SteelSeries, and Logitech. The next topic we're going to cover is your mouse and game settings. I don't want to go into super depth here because I already created a video recently that covers this at length. You can find it on screen here and also linked in the description. The too long didn't watch version of that is that you want to set your DPI somewhere between 400 and 1600, turn off mouse acceleration anywhere you can find it, and set your in-game mouse sensitivity to take about a full swing of your XL size mousepad to do a 360-degree rotation in-game. Playing at a low sensitivity has many benefits and we'll touch on that in a little bit. For reference, in Destiny 2 I'm currently using 800 DPI, 5 in-game sensitivity, 0.8 ADS modifier, and 6 out of 11 Windows sensitivity with no mouse acceleration. You're also going to want to do your best to max out your frames per second in-game by lowering your graphics settings and turning off VSync, G-Sync, or FreeSync. Playing at a lower frame rate or with these sync options turned on gives you a lot more input lag, which is not a good thing for your ability to aim consistently. Now that we've covered selecting a good mouse and choosing the right settings, let's talk a little bit about how you actually hold your mouse along with your arm and wrist mechanics. There's 3 major types of grips that pretty much all players fall under when they're holding a mouse, and you combine any of the 3 grips to create sort of a hybrid grip that feels most comfortable for you. The first type of grip we'll talk about is fingertips. This is where the only major contact points touching the mouse are the tips of your fingers, like this. The fingertips grip gives you a lot of ability to move the mouse both side to side and vertically, but sometimes it can be a little bit straining on your hands during really long gaming sessions, and it can also feel a little bit less stable since you have less of your hand touching the mouse. The next popular type of grip is called claw. This shape typically has a little bit more contact with the palm of your hand, and the fingers are arched up really high like an eagle's talons. With this grip type, you gain a little bit more stability than fingertips, but you do lose a little bit of the vertical movement capabilities. The final type of grip is palm. This is where the majority of your hand is making contact with the mouse. This is the most comfortable grip for many people, but you do lose a little bit of ability to make very small vertical adjustments without moving your entire arm. There's no right or wrong grip type, and most people use some sort of combination of each style. The reason it's important to familiarize yourself with these styles is that when you're shopping around for a new mouse, you'll find that some suit different grip styles than others based on the mouse shape. In my mind, the key is to find the best grip that works for you personally by experimenting a little bit and see which one gives you the best combination of comfort and control. Personally, I tend to sit somewhere in between a fingertips and a palm grip, where most of my contact is touching the palm of my hand and the tips of my fingers, with big gaps underneath the base of my fingers. This is actually one of the reasons I've recently switched back to using my old mouse, the Zowie EC2A. After many months of using the G Pro wireless, I found I just never got as solid of a grip as my tried and true Zowie, and the G Pro would wiggle just a bit under my fingers, causing some fatigue and some hand cramping after long sessions. The next major topic to cover is your arm mechanics. Many players when first starting to play FPS games on a mouse and keyboard tend to start with a very high sensitivity and only use their wrist and fingers to move the mouse. The problem with this style is that it's very hard to have precision movements with such a high sensitivity. I'm not saying it's impossible. There are definitely a few phenomenal Destiny 2 players like Walla that play with a very high sensitivity, but I can tell you that most of the top aimers in any FPS game tend to go with a little bit lower of a sensitivity. There's a few cool resources on the internet to see various settings of top CSGO pro players, and from a quick study you can clearly see that almost all of them fall within a very narrow margin of a low sensitivity. I bring up CSGO often because Counter-Strike has stood the test of time and produced some of the absolute best aimers in the history of FPS gaming. It's a great game to study when you're trying to master the fundamentals. So if we're aiming with a lower sensitivity to improve our muscle memory, that also means we need to change which muscles are moving the mouse. You want to be using the bigger muscles in your arm. This means your elbow and even some of your shoulder is getting involved. As I mentioned earlier, it should roughly take you a full swing of your mousepad to do a 360-degree turn in game. One important thing to cover here is having a consistent setup each time you go to play the game. At the end of the day, our primary goal here is to develop muscle memory so that when you see an enemy, your brain automatically knows exactly how far to move your muscles so that your crosshair ends up right on the enemy player's head. This means you need to develop a pivot point where your arm crosses your desk and try to keep that exact same setup every time you play the game. Here's a picture of what my typical setup looks like for reference. So now that you have an understanding of the proper mouse movement mechanics, I think one of the best ways to do this is to use an aim training game like Aim Hero or Kovac's FPS Aim Trainer. You can find each of them on Steam for just a few dollars. The key here is to set up your in-game sensitivity as close as possible to your game of choice. For example, here's the current settings I'm using to match my Destiny 2 setup. In Kovac's, there's a bunch of amazing minigames to practice your aim. Each one is focused on a particular type of aiming to make you faster and more consistent. Flicking aim is where you move your crosshair from off target to on target in a single motion and click once. In Destiny, this is the type of aim that's most beneficial to master for hand cannons, shotguns, and snipers. Tracking aim is where you glue your crosshair to the target and follow it with as much precision as possible. This type of aim works best with weapons like auto rifles, SMGs, pulse rifles, and fusion rifles. Mastering both types of aim is incredibly important to become a solid player, and you should really work on both. But most players do tend to find that one or the other is easier for them naturally. For flicking aim, some of my favorite Kovac's game types are Tile Frenzy for speed, One Wall 6 targets for accuracy training, and Popcorn for an extra challenge. For tracking aim, I really like Ascended Tracking V3 for the basics and Thin Aiming Long for an extra challenge. The final topic to cover, which is possibly the most important of all of them, is pre-aiming. You could have the best mechanical aim of anyone on the planet, but if your crosshair is 180 degrees away from the enemy and their crosshair is already aimed at you because they had a better sense of game awareness, you're likely going to lose the fight. There's no real shortcut for developing better game awareness. It comes from putting in hours and hours of practice, knowing the maps extremely well, understanding spawn points, and where the enemy is likely to be at any given point based on your team's map control. In the future, I'd like to make a whole video on this topic alone, because it's absolutely one of the most important topics to understand when you're trying to improve at any FPS game. For now, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. You need to make sure that your crosshair is never just sitting lazily on the ground. You should be always mentally preparing to see an enemy at each corner and having your crosshair pre-aimed at the exact spot so that all you need to do is pull the trigger to get a headshot. I think the best way to learn this is from watching top players play the game and focusing on where they put their crosshair. Spend some time watching streams and videos of players like Little Sonic, Nefariu, Potato, Foxpax, and Panda. Their crosshair is almost always positioned perfectly, so all they have to do is click when they're ready to shoot. They don't need to waste much time flicking to their target because their crosshair is almost always close to where it needs to be. Possibly the best way to learn the skill for yourself is to download some pre-fire maps and give them a shot. Unfortunately, Destiny 2 doesn't have something like this built into the game, but luckily now CSGO is free to play and it's a great alternative. After trying these maps out for yourself, spend some time studying pro players clear these maps with incredible speed. They have some of the best pre-aiming skills of any FPS I've ever watched. For example, watch this clip where Kenny S precisely clears every possible angle where his opponent is likely to be. This way all he has to do is click when he spots an enemy. That wraps it up for now. I really hope you learned something cool from this video. If so, please let me know in the comments. Videos like this one take a long time for me to put together, so if you enjoyed it, please consider giving a rating to this video so other players can find it, and subscribe so you don't miss my next video. I stream many nights of the week on Twitch, and I love talking about ways to improve your aim. You can catch me over at twitch.tv/pattycakespc. We also have a great Discord community that's growing fast. It's a great place to chat about the game and meet some really cool people. There's a link to join in the description. That's all for now. Catch you guys next time.